Welcome back to another session. This one is going to be quite different from all of the others since I saw that I was just doing the same thing over and over again. It was all concept art. I was thinking of why not do some different type of concept art that I don't see that much out there. What we're going to do right now is do level design. I'm not gonna do the level design within the engine of the game that I want to discuss in this here session, but we're gonna do planning basically. I need to remember to write stuff because the screen kind of gets static for quite a while, and I don't put on any BGM, so feel free to put whatever background music that you want to. So we're gonna do the planning here, and I'm gonna do a bunch of breakdowns for things that for you as a beginner level designer might not know of or think of or even consider. And if you're a well practiced level designer, maybe you also can learn something from a fellow level designer, although I don't have the professional credit of working with professional studios yet, but I do this stuff quite not consistently, but I do it in like regular intervals. And yeah, currently I am looking since I was studying how to program properly. I was thinking of actually doing mods for games that I really like, something like Mario 64 and Mario Odyssey. Those two games are quite great in terms of their movesets. And the game that we're going to talk about today, which is Breath of the Wild. This is a great game, quite arguably the best game of all time. And we're gonna do a level design for this. What kind of level? Well, I was thinking of a coliseum, basically, which is just a ring that you fight in. And this is due to the fact that this game does have quite bad combat. When I say bad, I don't mean like it is bad because I have put thousands of hours into this game. So when I say bad, think it think of it from that perspective, because when I was just getting into the game, I really enjoyed that. I played the living shit out of it, and I was even beating those enemies that quite honestly they're just a waste of time, which is like the silver and golden variation of each one of the enemies. They're quite a waste of time if you want to go for them. And there is the main problem of the gameplay, which is there is no reward for everything that you do in this game. So everything that you do doesn't have a slight hint of a reward other than getting the parts of whatever enemy that you have beaten. So we're not gonna be talking about game design right here, but we're gonna focus on is the combat itself in the moveset. So what we gonna deal with here, think of this as this is the gameplay. This is the gameplay right here is like the gameplay is over here. This is everything within the game. What we are focusing on is just this combat right here. The combat part, obviously, the movement also. There is some secondary stuff like the uh, the physics that are also part of it, the physics and chemistry engine, but those are just the world itself. They are not necessary gameplay parts. So those two things are what we're gonna focus on. And whenever you do some sort of level design, you don't just level design. The first thing that comes before that is designing the moveset of your character, because you cannot design a level that have ladders, for example, and your character cannot climb ladders. You cannot have something with a door and your character cannot open a door. You cannot have something with like a lower thing that you can get through, for example, like some lower hole or some broken part of the wall, and your character cannot crouch. So these are problems. So that is why you start with the egg before the chicken. I know that there is like a kind of dilemma thing, which is like which one is the first, but start with the moveset of your character and put everything in there. Any changes to the moveset of the character will make some things that you have put in your level serve no purposes. So that is why you have to prioritize that. And that is what we're doing here. One problem though is that Lunk in this game basically he can climb on every surface in the game. So how do we do this? Uh, there are two solutions for this. One, number one, if I want to do it like this, is to just simply disable the climbing aspects of Link's moveset. That is quite bad because it is too much in your face. This is something that you would do in an amateurish game, a Western game. And I'm sorry if you are a Western developer, but it is what it is. The levels of expertise differ between the West and the East, and most importantly, the nuance of hinting at stuff instead of punching you in the face with it, which is what this is and why a Western developer will see this as a normal thing because it is in your face. A Asian one will be like Japanese one specifically when I say Asian one because Korean and Chinese ones lean more to the Western way of game development. They don't follow the Japanese way. They just try to imitate it. So read the room, the concept of reading the room basically and hinting at stuff instead of saying stuff. So what is a hint for the player to understand to not fuck around with climbing the edges of the level? What is the best passive aggressive way of doing so? It is so simple yet so complex at the same time. Complex in the way that you don't think of it. I think someone is blasting loud music outside. I hope you don't hear him, but yeah, what we're gonna do is just disable, is just limit the stamina bar to having just one stamina bar, or maybe we'll have just one and a half. That is the maximum of them. Why do we want to do this exactly, precisely, specifically? Is because we're gonna have walls that are tall, tall enough for the player to not be able to climb them at any rate. So if the player starts from, let's say they start right here, this is the player. So when they reach here, their stamina will be null. It will have been emptied, all of it depleted. Even if they were jumping, for example, and I don't think jumping will consumes more stamina, but maybe it does cover more distance. So let's say the distance is here. So our wall obviously needs to be taller than this. And it needs to be taller in a way that if this is the tallest or the highest peak that the player can reach, it needs to be like this is like half of this distance or more than half of it is what's left in here. So to confirm to the player that you cannot climb these walls, because if it was, for example, something like this, the player can and will finesse their way to the top and thus breaking the level. So that is one solution. The other solution is maybe we don't need this because we have an arena like a Colosseum type of level, but we might have to deal with this problem because in this Colosseum, I, the genius that I am, I have thought of something like you have the Colosseum right here, something like the Colosseum within Breath of the Wild, uh, except it is more like a Roman Colosseum and stuff. So you have the Colosseum right here, and you have like the whatever, like the audience over here. The Colosseum doesn't have audience; it just have pathways for some reason, but you have this. So in this arena right here, if we zoom in on this arena, you might have something like this, which is scaffoldings for people with or monsters with ranged weapons. So we can have something like this, someone's that are even taller with some throwables is either bombs or rocks or things of that sort, or something that will be thrown at you that is something like a Molotov cocktail, for example, that will spread fire and so on. The player can obviously climb these. Obviously. How do we protect these from being climbed? The solution is easier than you think. There are two ways of doing so, and both of them share the same thing, which is having these very spiky uh, tips. So they are those thorns that you find in one of the towers. You find like this spiky thorns all over the place, and you touch them and you get blown back. There is like a bounce back for the player. So there is one, and the second one is the I don't know what this called, but they're just spikes of like the area where you find the final memory or the kind of after the first stable that you find canonically if you follow the path to trying to go to Kakariko village. There is that wall where you find like that field with a lot of dead guardians. So you will find a lot of these spikes. These spikes also, if you touch them, you will be bounced back. So if we think smart, we can just fill this right here with these spikes. Because if we did this, one of these, if they have throwables that have fire on them, or if the player, the discussing gremlins that they are, got their hand on something that is flammable, they can burn these and thus nullifying the danger. And even like killing whoever is up here if we like did something like this where we have the vines of the thorns going all the way up to the enemy. They might nullify them, they might kill them, because enemies like this, if you know like how Breath of the Wild works roughly, you got like something like the big enemy. I don't know what the fuck kind of ears are those, but you get like the big enemies like this. This is like a normal bokoblin. So with a you got a bokoblin with a bow. When you hit him in the head, it is like two times the damage that you deal. But if this one was the one that is on the lookout on a high ground, like the platform that we talked about before, they will get more damage, and that damage is like 20 or 200 if you headshot them, which will guaranteed a kill. And that is something that we need to do with these kind of things, like the monsters that we're gonna put in the platforms away from the player. We need to give the player some sort of assist for them to be able to take them down easily. So that is how this setup is going to work roughly. This is the kind of rough logic that we're going to follow forward designing this level. So we have the environment of the level. How can we go about doing so? How can we go about designing it or coming up with ideas for it? Uh, it is simple actually. First, we have the movement. Movement is the key of anything that we're dealing with in 3D specifically. We have our player right here. We're gonna draw them like a pawn, and they can move. They can move forward. They can move backwards. They can move obviously to the sides. This is something all we know, and there is the elusive z-axis. This is the most important one for a 3D game, is to utilize that z-axis, because this isn't a 2D game. And believe it or not, up till now, 2026, there is no game that have utilized this z-axis properly, or actually went out of its way to uh, play around with this concept of the depth of the game, like the depth of perception. This isn't like a 2D thing, or like you have to be like on rails for the game to function, but actually invest in that depth. There is no actual game that have done that. And even with something like Breath of the Wild, they did utilize this z-axis. They abused it, if I have to say, but still it is not utilized as much as it should be. They could have done that with Tears of the Kingdom, but that was a disappointment. We're gonna leave that for another day. Movement. So with movement, obviously we have the ground itself. So this is where we can start playing with the whatever things that we want to do. So the first thing that we can do is just start with a plain ground. This level, this Colosseum thing, by the way, I'm thinking of it like something similar to the ones that you find in the depths in Tears of the Kingdom. You find a bunch of Colosseums, and each one of them have variations of the same enemy, which are boring, especially with the combat system that did not change at all. So we're gonna do some changes here, but not with the combat system. We're not gonna program anything in terms of the combat system. All we're gonna do is just move some numbers around and move some enemies around. What we're gonna do is just focus on the combinations of enemies, because when you combine enemies, you combine in problems. When you create complex problems, you create complex gameplay that is equal to something more engaging. Not complex in the way that it is so complex to solve, as in a tedious way, but in an enjoyable way. So yeah, dealing with range enemies in addition to ones that are next to you, in addition to ones that are agile, like the Lizalfos, for example, that can move from the front to the back of the player in a swift way, while the player is still trying to deal with the bokoblin or a moblin that is coming toward them, and so on, in addition to the range kind of hitting them. So they have to deal with each one of them and try to prioritize their target, because there is this concept, and if you're playing a beat 'em up, for example, and you're here, this is your character, and this is the guy in front of you, and you might already be beating the living hell out of this guy. So you're punching this guy, you're beating the living hell out of him, but you failed to recognize that you actually are not fighting this guy. This guy is already this already guy. He is done. You already done with this one, but there is this one right here. I'm gonna represent him with someone with this weird drawn, badly drawn pants. You have this guy that is a guy that kicks. A guy that kicks in games like these is someone that have a long range. He either like kicks you from very far away. He's like a mid-range. Think of it like a spear user. In our case, in Breath of the Wild, how they can like start swinging the spear on top of their heads, or things of that sort. Even their thrust is very far away. So he can either like kick you or jump and kick you and cover a lot of range and knock you back. So uh, depending on the game, getting up might be hard. There is also someone that is coming from behind you. That is a problem. There is someone that's right here, which is like the classic whip girl, the girl that have the whip that either hits you from very far away and is just annoying, or it stuns you. When it hits you, it's like pulls your leg, so it drops you down, which creates a problem because you might get hit and you might stagger while you're trying to get up, and this might just stun you, which is like just spinning the whip around you and just stunning you in place. So uh, that is the kind of thing that we're dealing with right here. So you're actually not fighting this guy, but you're trying to be careful from this guy that is coming from behind you, while paying attention to this guy so he doesn't do anything so sudden, and in addition to trying to stay far away from this girl right here with the whip, so it doesn't fuck your shit up. In addition to maybe this whole arena is set on fire. So if the whole thing is set on fire, there is an additional problem which we add in like the enemies plus the environment, and we create something that is pretty heinous or hideous to deal with. So this is the kind of approach that we're gonna deal. We can again approach this problem of creating this coliseum, because when I say we have just a plain one like this one gonna evolve to something that is a bit tricky to deal with when we add the addition of this tower lookouts that are made in a very raggedy manner. They're obviously similar to their counterparts in Breath of the Wild, but this one is made for more like an entertaining purpose, not just for the sake of survival, which is the one in Breath of the Wilds are. So we have these ones that have like different heights and so on, scattered all around. Maybe not all of them will be populated, but we're gonna create some platforms or differences in heights in enemies that you cannot reach, so you have to think on your feet. Obviously, we said that we can add in the spikes so the player cannot just easily climb them. So you have these, and then we have another variation. This variation will have us, if this is the arena size or the size of the map, we're gonna split it into like small islands. These floating things, floating rafts or whatever they might be, these are the only surfaces that the player can have. In addition to the fact that something like this in the corner might have uh, another enemy with a bow or a throwable, or this might be like some small piece of land right here with obviously spikes all over it. So these are not just some technical thing that we use to keep the player away, because right here this is like, hold on, like all of this is going to be water, and if this all of it is water, that means enemies like the Lozalfos can utilize these. Enemies like the Lozalfos, those lizard bastards, can move very fast within here, and they can dive in and jump at you from another direction. For example, you knock them here, they can jump at you from that other direction right there. This isn't something that they do in Breath of the Wild, but we can program them to do so, and we can think of them like doing so in our scenario right here in this level design, which is just utilizing the uh, the building blocks that we have in a different manner. And the way that we can go about doing this is just to increase their speeds for a like certain period, which is like this period that we call it like, we're gonna call it like teleport. And this thing is going to be like, this is the player. The player is right here, and we're gonna have this point that is away from the player, that kind of gauges or like do a retracing to see the nearest wet point or the nearest like body of water where it is. So when it traces back and it finds this point right here, this is where the lizard that we knocked off, if we knock the lizard right here, the Lizarfo will teleport, which is like they're doing just their path tracing that they do usually, and they're gonna teleport to this point. While in their this teleport phase, we're gonna maybe do something like what they do in the game, which is something like this, where they multiply the effects of your hit when you hit someone on guard. So we're gonna do something like that when we increase the speed to like an insane degree. So it's like teleporting basically, and then the game resumes as if nothing happens. So yeah, that is the logic that I'm thinking of right here. And if we did so, we're gonna create something that is pretty interesting. In addition to the fact that you will have some other enemies on land, enemies that vary also. So these are the ideas that I have. Obviously, we can combine both of these to create something that is, you have platforms that are pretty high up. So for example, these platforms themselves, or these towers, we gonna give the player the access to all of these towers by having the towers float on top of these floaties right here, but the player cannot climb obviously all of them. And we're gonna add in something even more uh, rootless to them, if you will. These are meant to be built in a raggedy way. So if we have all of these things floating, and we can change one, change this from being like water to be like that swamp, uh, quicksand, quicksand thing that they have in the game. It's like the one in that tower in the desert. There is one that is next to the Yiga hideout, and there is the other one, the first one that you're probably gonna unlock, that you have this muddy thing, swampy, bubbly lake that you're gonna sink in if you stand in there for too long. And there is another one also next to the tower where next to the forest. I forgot what it was called, the Kokiri forest next to it. So this is basically the floor is lava, but you got a chance to get out of there. In addition to the fact that maybe if we allow you to utilize your Sheikah Slate abilities, you will be able to freeze some parts in there and be able to do some platformings, if you will, because these platforms are made out of wood. The logic of the logic of the physics of the game says that material and material plus material will equal something, which is either nothing, or it is equal to like amplifying, which is electricity and water, for example. They amplify each other, and water and fire will cancel each other. uh, but if you have a material plus an object, this object will be changed. This object will be changed to the better or to the worse. Mostly, if we have something like fire, and you add it, like let's say we have fire plus an apple, it will give us a baked apple. But if we have wood, it will give us nothing, because that wood will be burnt and disintegrated, like what you see with the boxes, for example. And since these are made out of wood, they might be burnt. I know it is hard to do so, so it needs to be made as in like put in like partially make it so it does burn or it does get damaged. And that can be done in a way by making the pathways made out of wood. If we make those pathways made out of wood, that means if an enemy throws a projectile at you that is fire, you're done. So that is the weird idea that I have for this level. That might be more than just a level. It can be like a whole game mode where you explore how much can you push the fighting system. Something like what you have with like the Trial of Sword, but a bit more nuanced, because even so, that trial feels too much like a DLC, a fan-made one at that. Here, we're not taking that much from the player. All we're gonna do is just take away the Sheikah Slash abilities and making the player focus on trying to deal with everything around them, utilizing only their fighting mechanics. So after uh, all of this said and done, let's try to produce the first level. So uh, we can create like some sort of demo. uh, One thing, yes, I forgot one thing, which is like the most important one. It is the enemies. In Breath of the Wild, I think we have like the bokoblins and the moblins and the lizarvos. Those are the main ones that you're gonna see quite a lot. We got the wizard, and that's about it. I'm trying to think if there are any more enemies. We got like the keys, which these can be negligible alone. They can do nothing. But maybe if like the ones that you find in the overworld, they're quite annoying and they deal damage. If they allow them in the game to deal more damage, I think they will be more intimidating. But the way that they are, I think, is also acceptable. But strength can be in numbers, but also if they can be part of a group, which is a bit more problematic because alone they're nothing. But in especially within a group and like a party type of group where each one individual complements the other. At least if you look at it in the game, you will find one example of that, which is when you're trying to do stealth. These fucking little bastards will always break your cover, even if you're trying to go stealthy. And I think even if you're wearing the Majora's masks, these ones individually, specifically, do not fall for that. I think that's what happens, but I'm not sure of that. But the ones with stealth, I am sure that they always fuck you up in that department. So just with that, we can do quite a lot with them, especially if we make them quite annoying to deal with. If you increase the speed of them a little bit, and I'm not talking here about the elemental variant of them, even though those can be quite a a hassle to deal with because think of this uh, like an electric one from these plus a lizard, which is the element of water. And think back to this, which is an elemental can amplify each other. If a lizard makes you wet and one of these attacks you at the same time, think of what will happen to the player. Uh, Not just taking damage, but also the fact that you lose whatever equipment that you had on you, be it shield, sword, or whatever. There is also another one that I was thinking of, which is like the choo choos. Uh, so in total, I think these are all of the enemies that you have, excluding obviously the Lionels, because I think the Lionels are the only interesting enemy in the game, and we don't want to overuse those. Uh, Hinoxes are pretty interesting, I think, and they can be put in these like a boss fight, in a sense, as they should be, but with a bunch of minions that will make the boss fight a bit more interesting, a bit more of a hassle to deal with, because it will not be easy to aim for their eyes straight up when you just meet them. In addition to the fact that we can add in some modifications, which is what I want to do uh, with this kind of design or this idea that I'm having right here, which is giving the enemies some armors instead of just changing their color, but giving them some armor will be better. So, for example, you have like the Hinoxes. He is like this, all big and dumb. Does he have shields? I don't think he has shields on top of him. But he have spears, he have bows, swords, and whatnot. So we have him like this, but we can add some armor on top of him. So what are the weak points that we have? We have one that is his legs. So obviously you can go for the legs. This is something that they put in Breath of the Wild actually, and you cannot just ease your way through it. So in Breath of the Wild you will find protection on the legs, either wood or metal. That is good. But we can add in some more. We can add it in a way that it is armor. That is not just for protection, but also for attack. If we cover his hands with whatever thing that we want to think of. One of uh, the horns in Tears of the Kingdom, that is basically like a chain. It is a ball, but it is like a chain that goes around, a chain that is wrapped around like a broken horn or something of that sort. And it is just something like this. And I think we can add in even some spike to it. I don't know if the original one had some spikes, but we can add in some spike to those. So when he hits the ground and the hit lands on you, it will do more damage. And if it hits the ground, so for example, let's say this is the ground, and the hit normally will do this damage, which is like this circle. Uh, Now, if it hits, it will do this damage, and that is the circle of impact that it will do. In addition to maybe if the player is standing on ground, they will be stunned for like about like 1 second or 1.5 seconds. 1 second is too much in a high octane action, especially if we're thinking here a Lozalfo is following you and two Bokoblins is following you at the same time. So you're kind of being like surrounded, and you need to think on your foot, not talking about the ranged enemies if there are any, if the player still haven't taken care of them. So this is a bit too much. So the player needs to pay attention to every one of the enemies on the scene. So when something like this happens, they need to jump immediately before they land, or the impact of the hit or the punch or the slam hits the ground. So the player needs to be on their foot. Another one, which will be quite a nice addition, which is a protection around the eye of the colossal, the cyclop, or the Hinox. It is a very important one because it introduces a problem that the player will have to deal with creatively. Because what kind of thing that we have here? Because we can go about doing so in terms of like concept art or whatever, and here where like the concept art kind of broadens a bit the view on concept art, because a lot of people think of concept art away from the actual thing that you're designing for, instead of the actual uh, uh, tactile or the touchable, engaging with type of thing, not just a pretty image that you put online. So something that you gonna deal with later on, either when you're developing the game or when you're playing the game, and it needs to be interesting, obviously. So one idea that I had is to have something like a barrel that is barely like hold together. So you have something like this, and yeah, obviously it is all broken and stuff, so it's barely like holding. Uh, it's barely holding together. So I think they have a horn also. So put that horn in there, and obviously their eye is over here. So this eye will be covered with like a piece of whatever you want to call it, like wood. The wood is going to be something like this, where it's over the eye, but not over it. Basically, what this is doing, think of the target. This is the target. What we're doing is just creating some obstacles, which is like some dead zones. So you cannot hit it right here, and you cannot hit it right here, and you cannot hit it over there, and also you cannot hit it over there. So instead of having that 100% of real estate that you can just land your hit on, it needs to be a bit more precise, because the way that it is currently, it is just a glowing red dot that is screaming to be blown the fuck out. When you do something like this, you make it a bit more difficult to deal with. So this is one. How to deal with this? Obviously, like anything else, fire. Hit it with a fire arrow or a fire projectile, and that thing will disintegrate, in addition to staggering uh, the Hinox and stunning them when they keep going on loop. in that weird animation of them just trying to put the fire away if you burn their legs. In Breath of the Wild, you know what I'm talking about. So we can do that. An additional one is a variant of these. One that it is worse, which is just the Hinox with like their horn out like this and a hole for their eyes. So this isn't that much of a challenge because the eye is still visible from the inside. The player can still see where the eye is and they can hit it. But this is a great opportunity for them to experiment because this is just cloth. This is just a random bag of wheat or potatoes that he puts on top of his head to try and protect his eyes. So this is just an introduction to this concept of trying to burn the protection or the armor away. But here we might have something like a proper helmet, which is like, let's move it over here. But the helmet might be something like this, something that is pretty beat up. Obviously, in the sides, it will be held together quite roughly, but the most important part is obviously protected. So I'm trying to draw here roughly like bended uh, armor or bended iron around the horn. And here we have the stripes that are barely holding in. We're gonna exaggerate that with like a bunch of rope because these are monsters, so they cannot put everything together in a very barbaric way, so they are barely held together. Add some more rope. Adding more rope like this kind of gives the player the idea that uh, this is like impenetrable kind of armor. So the vision is more of something like a knight. So it is very well protected. What you can do instead is your cell can stun the eye, but right now the way to do so is to hit them with an elemental arrow instead of fire. This time hit them with thunder or lightning. Now when you do so, you're gonna electrify the whole head, thus dealing a bit more damage and achieving the stunned state that you're after. So these are the kind of variations, but how can this be difficult for the player to achieve? This is where the level design and kind of the engineering of this experience, because this needs to be a whole experience. For example, like think of it like this. We have like this is the end where we find the boss. This is the midpoint. There are a couple of checkpoints here between them, and between those there are like a couple of fights. There might be like this many, but they might be just these ones that I highlighted. Like these ones are the main points. So the player is obviously gonna get through a lot of fights, and because you're getting through a lot of fights, think of it again back to the beat 'em up game example. You have only a limited amount of resources, so you need to conserve your resources instead of just throwing them all away. So think of it as the bombs, for example. You as the player, you have your bombs that are unlimited amount of them. Obviously, for this example right here, for this level, we're gonna limit the share out of them. So you can just keep throwing the bombs away. So you need to conserve these. So if you got 10 of them, you need to spare these uh, pretty like conservatively. You need to keep as much possible for either this final boss right here, or there might be here some situation where you need to utilize them, because remember, these smelly smelly bastards cannot swim. Little bokoblin soul leaving their dead, drowned body. So they cannot swim. So when you're swarmed with these enemies, when an enemy like this is creating an obstacle for you in a level that is like this one, where there is a lot of water, you can use the bomb The bomb does not have just a damage effect, but also a knockback effect to knock them back and drown them. So these are the kind of situations that you need to utilize this for. And especially if you have too many of them, the bomb can serve as not just something to take away the ranged enemies, but also to do damage or crowd control. Many utilizations for the same weapon or the same item. These many utilizations only exist because we, as the level designers, want them to exist and to do something basically. So uh, this is just one of the things. Another one will be the arrows, and the arrows are quite a problem because we want to give the player the arrows, but at the same time, we want them to conserve them. So, for example, if we have a level where there is 3 to 4 archers, we're gonna give the player a bundle of 5 of them. So we're gonna give them just 5 of them. Those 5 of them, they can use all of them. They can find a way to take down the enemies because maybe we need to be quite charitable as level designers here and give the players something like how you have some platforms here and there and in the vanilla game where you have something like basically TNT on a platform, and the platform does have something that is basically it does have like a cross right here, and you shoot it and it blows things up. So we can have things like this, like hazardous as environment, which is making the environment a bit interactable. So we can have things like these, but also at the same time we can have some additional stuff, which is in one of the areas we might make the player go through some stuff. We can either make the player do something like what we have in fighting games, where you have a level where you just beat up a car. We can have them just break some parts, break as much parts as possible, and the more that they do so, the better like their reward is. So they might be rewarded as one of these things, which is pretty useful resources, or they might be rewarded like that hearty meal thing, which is like this is not it. I think it was drawn like this, the hearty thing, or like a durian meal, which will give them like extra health. Which health is something also that you need to manage in this mode or in this situation in these levels that we want to design. So in addition to them being dropped in this weird quirky level that serves as a rest from all of the tactician work that they have to do, but also as a reward. An additional thing is also having those breakable items that are present in a level be important not in a way that they are like first thing that the players want to do, but it is a secondary thing. The player can ignore them if they have enough money, enough enough resources, enough food, enough everything. They can completely ignore those. But if they need them, if they are on the tip of the edge of dying, they might need those. So they are secondary, but they might be primary depending on the situation of the player. And that is the best thing because interactability and player choice. So yeah, I think those are all of the points that I want to hit on. So we're gonna start with some ideas that I had while I was talking. So one idea, big one, which is range. How about range that creates both a range in an environment? What do I mean by this? Think of a large, very large bow thing. Think of something like this large. This hitting the player will deal, let's say, if the player, we're gonna, I still have not thought of how much the player's health is going to be, but if the player's health is this is going to do this much damage in a way that it will take only 2.5 hits for the player to die from this. Why the half is to give the player a chance after the second hit, and in case the player healed, this might turn into like 3 hits, which is in total will be just 5 hits, and you will die. If they survived in the first place, because this half is also they're fighting some other enemies, so they might take that half. These are not something that you can beat. These are something that's going to be outside of the arena, on the corners of the Colosseum, hitting you. So what you need to do is just to avoid them. Uh, One mode that I just thought of, which is survival. This I think I'm putting it too close, so let's put it something like this. We zoom on later on. So we have like this is bad framing. I'm gonna put it without a frame, but we have something like this. The player is obviously running away, and we need to create something in the environment. So for example, we can have those things that the bokoblins do have around their camp, that they have like some weird weird smiley faces on them. We can have something like that around here, and maybe some additional ones that are pretty wide, and they might seem like they are a bit uh, reinforced in a way. So we can have some of these, and behind these we can have them obviously being composed like a little bit of something that is a bit more complex. And yeah, something like this will be obviously a bit tall, so behind it there are some weird staircases that are not straight up. So you might have something like a hole in here where you have to just go up a bit, jump, and then continue, because this is survival, so you need to make it as not just walking around, so you need to do something other than just moving the stick. So this is the thing that I'm thinking of. Plus, these are just wooden structures, so if they get hit with one of these, they're gonna be destroyed. So there isn't a place that is a permanent hideout, so the player need to be constantly moving. And obviously the arena will not be just uh, a constant flat space. So it's going to be like something like this. Think of it like a Pac-Man, and you're being hunted by the ghosts. Practically, is this what it is? And this, when we think of it like Pac-Man, I am kind of doing out loud thinking about this is what the sessions is all about. So if we think of it like Pac-Man, we can give the AIs of these things, since we set the corners, let's call it like four corners, like the four corners of the earth. We have four corners, four enemies, each one of them is doing a thing. Same thing with the logic that we said before, which is like we have uh, the pretty boy Lunk over here. This is Lunk. We have a ray trace in front of him, ray tracing a point. This is where one of them aims. So let's say that this is projectile 1. He aims for this point. Projectile 2 is aiming for this thing. Let's call it just B. Aims for this thing right here. Projectile 4 or 3, sorry, is aiming for this one. You have this, and you have a distance from this one is where the projectile 4 or 3 is aiming. The fourth one is aiming for the one on the left of this one. So it's either gonna hit this or this. I'm not naming this because we can conserve this spot or this slot. We can make the P3, the AI represented or responsible for the the third projectile, the third spot, can be represented by these two, and they can randomly choose between these two. Why are we doing this exactly? Because the player might move this direction or the other one. So just to give it the sense that these are like smart NPCs or whatever, they're gonna aim for either one of these points. So this is the thing for those. And the fourth one will always hit a bit delayed where the player was. They always hit there. So we can give the player the idea that they are surrounded, that there is nowhere to fucking run. So we also need to be charitable to the player so we're not torturing him, because this is a game. This is a puzzle. It needs to be solved somehow, but not just a traditional puzzle. This is a dynamic puzzle that changes according to what you do. That is why we make all of these like decisions, like this one being random and this one being always in front of the player. So we kind of prediction where the player goes. So we kind of keeping the player on their toes basically. So baiting the hits is the thing to do here, because I think it is like the most obvious thing to do, like a strategy for a player to do. Any gamer will know something like this. That is why P4 is over here, just in case the player goes back, that might get hit immediately. So this is the logic of this thing. And the other thing is we're gonna have something like this where we have a bunch of areas that you can go to. Uh, what else do we have? We need the structure. So this is like the interesting concept. This is where level design actually comes to play, because we don't need to just think of what to put on the map, but also how do we go about doing so. Something that is quite interesting is the way that you see in one of the areas in the swords or trial of the sword, or swords trial, whatever it was called, the DLC one. When you go back to the Deku tree and you put the swords where it was, you will find one of the ruins. You will find one of the ruins basically like this, but it is in a field next to a tree, if I remember correctly. In a field encapsulated in a dome. So there's the same thing that I'm thinking here. Maybe we'll do something like that in concept. We obviously cannot do this because this is, if we want to like warp the perspective, this got a roof, and this roof can be broken too. And Breath of the Wild does not have any logic to break brick structures or rocky structures, so we're not gonna do that. But what we can have is just something like this in terms of structure, which we can refer to the Bokoblin hideouts, and we can have something like that where the player can run around, but we can strip it from the tree because they're always leaning on a tree or something like that. So it needs to be climbable. So we need to have add a variation of heights. What I'm thinking of right now is something like a spiral, and obviously it adds in height. So this is the height. This is the height. You either climb a ladder to get up to this height, or you climb some stairs, and then there is this height over here, and then you drop to something else. But doing so will make it so the player is obviously constructed or guided into just climbing higher and higher, and thus making it like an on rail thing. Instead, I think we go with something like this where we just add places that the player can hide. For example, hide behind something like uh, this thing, and spawn them in a way, something like this. So we have them be like this. For example, this is a line, and these are lines leading there. So yeah, we can have this also be like a structure, because this where we add in those like stairs things, but obviously all of this will be broken. So maybe if the player gets in here from this direction or this direction, they will find like this thing will have, it will have like some sort of window that the player can jump can jump out of it. So the player can jump out of the window, because obviously all of this is going to be destroyed, so they better not get caught inside and just be pinned to the wall. That is a bad spot to be in, because technically if we think of like the ball that we put right there, they're gonna be surrounding the player, in addition to the one that cannot find a place behind the player, which will make it just get stuck to the player, because there is nowhere behind the player when you do the raycast. The the thing just, yeah, we're fucking up the player. The player will die if they get stuck in a situation like this. So that is why we create something like that. And these don't need to be that much, just one center point and the other one just scattered, because we are using these points as like health points or like an armor. How many times can we fuck up, basically? So the player is running around. If they think that they get a bit tired or their stamina depleted, even though that most of the players will probably be using the glitch of the whistle, but if they get tired of doing dash IRL by holding their head in that like crab position when you're trying to do dash whistle, they can hide behind one of these, and are guaranteed to at least one of those spears, arrows, things will not hit them. So that is idea number one. And this idea can also carry to other ones. So idea number one was for what? For survival. Survival for like, I don't know, 3 minutes. The whole thing of this exercise that I'm doing right here is just to see how far we can push the combat of the game. So the second one obviously will be focused on combat. What kind of combat are we talking about here? We're gonna do multiple levels, which is like introductory levels. So even this one of survival is an introductory level for this weapon, because later on we're gonna have this weapon shooting at the player while they're fighting other enemies, and later on we're gonna have this weapon shooting at the player while they're fighting a boss like a Hinox, for example. So it is not just a one-off pony. So that is why when you're developing a game or something like that, put time and effort into each one of the things that you're designing, so you can uh, use them or reuse them, if you will. You want to make them versatile, if that makes any sense. So yeah, we have our arena. Here is the arena. That is not the arena. Hold on. Recording this episode at 3 a.m. is not the best thing, I think. But I made a promise to myself to record these and put them out there, so I'm gonna do it. So as you can see, we shut those down in a pretty weird way. Obviously, they are the gates, but we're shutting those down like that because we want to create like that prison feel. The player is right here facing three bokoblins. Obviously, you're facing three bokoblins. They come at you this way, but one of them spreads and goes that way. One of them spreads and goes this way. Basic logic. So, or this one, I think he should be behind it right there. So this is just showing the player that you're going to be dealing with multiple enemies. Obviously, putting just one bokoblin in there is a very bad way, because there is a very tutorial like. So two of those will be blue, one will be black in terms of their levels. There is later on we're gonna start putting like armor on top of them, not just armor but also weapons, better ones, and there might be like a gimmicky one like the float or the leaf that just blows you away. So we can have the player go through like some obstacle type of thing where the not only do they get hit by arrows from far away, but also they get blown by these enemies off the course, dropping them down either to lava or to that quicksand thing. So yeah, we have this. We introduce this one right here, and then we can introduce the next one, which is uh, arena, and then we find them fighting a, moblin. Then we got two bokoblins here. So we have like moblin. I'm gonna put just an M, one and two B's. Then what we're gonna add in later on is this is like composing music because not only we add in different instruments, but later on we can add some effects. The effects here are the keys because when you add those keys, you kind of disturb the flow of everything else that the player expects because the keys they damage you. They don't just stand there; they also damage. So we're gonna make them uh, like the surprise element of the encounters. So we have them here in addition to we have the moblins and the bokoblins because the moblins are stronger than the bokoblins and they get a different pattern of attack and they deal more damage. Next one is we're gonna step back, introduce just one enemy. Here where we introduce the fact that the player cannot get up to the enemies, they cannot climb up. That is a problem. What we can do instead is just do the equivalent of a Looney Tunes gag. The player obviously will have zero arrows, so they cannot hit this thing. So they need to do a puzzle to hit them. A puzzle in real time when you're fighting is too much. So the puzzle here will be just a quick thing. Find a way to hit them or get them down from there. That will be the puzzle. The puzzle also can be like finding somewhere one of these legs will not have that thing on it, these thrones, and the leg will be like something that is pretty torn off. So the player only needs to hit it a couple of times for the whole thing to crumble. That is a possibility. Or throw a bomb at that place and the thing will crumble. You will not have to waste an arrow. So you kind of trade in an arrow for a bomb in that case. Regardless, we're just introducing to the player how to deal with this type of enemies with no projectiles. Now that we did all of that, we're gonna combine all of these into we have this. Pretty cool, right? We got the player, pretty cool also. We got the moblin, pretty decent. We got the bokoblin, one, two. We got the keys that are coming from these directions. What we got also is like the keys, it is something like effects if we kind of keep going with that like analogy of games, of music, sorry. Which is something that we already introduced here, so the player knows that to not fuck with these and also knows to not there is a limitation to their movements because your placement, your location within the arena dictates your future. Dictates either it is a victory or a loss. So that is the thing right here. So the player need to mind their steps. Maybe we'll not put it everywhere, all of the corners. We need to keep a corner for a breather, obviously. But this is one of the things that we can do. Uh, Obviously, the next thing for this type of design is to just escalate things even further. These are, by the way, all of them the same size of the arena. It's just that I'm drawing it bigger to give myself a bit more real estate to draw in a bit more things. And the sketching style here is pretty it's pretty jaggedy and shit, because this is not meant to be like pretty drawings, and these are going to be turned into 3D if I'm doing something seriously, or I wanna have something for reference later on, or wanna pitch it or something of that sort. So we have something like this. We have something like this in addition to the fact that you have bokoblins and a big moblin surrounding the player. Now one of these is someone that is throwing bombs or throwing just random projectiles to be like an introduction. Uh, we need to add like a bow right here and another one that throws projectiles over here, just rocks for an introduction. Now here it's going to be a decent thing to deal with all of these, because we kind of frame chop everything from nothing. So we're kind of looking at the evolution, the natural evolution for the previous idea. This one is pretty decent, but then we're gonna follow it with uh, something that is natural, obviously, also, which is scaling up the enemies. We're gonna start scaling up the enemies, but you cannot just scale up an enemy out of nowhere and the player does not know, or they're not familiar with what is a more powerful enemy does. Or if you put an armor on an enemy, the player will not know how to deal with that. And especially if you put that in addition to all of this, where this there is a lot going on over here. This is too much, and you add in that element of I don't know what the fuck is going on, you're cheating the player. The player feels like they are cheated, not given a fair deal, which this is will be pretty difficult to deal with, but at the same time, it is a fair deal because they know the bokoblins, they know the moblins, they faced bokoblins in a group before, and they face the archers and know how they work, both of them, and the spikes. The only thing that is new is that there are two archers, and the new thing is not the archer itself. It's just that they have to come up with a strategy to deal with both of them. There's the thing. So yeah, the next one will introduce just one enemy, and this enemy will be just a either a moblin or a bokoblin. I'm saying a bokoblin will be more like, since they're the size of the player, will be a bit too much, because if we put a more powerful one, like one that have like a helmet or something of that sort, like a helmet, something like this will be too much for the player, especially because we want to like amplify some things, mainly the not just the attack but also the speed of the attacks. So because we don't want to change the attacks, if it was for me, we'll introduce some new combos to both the player and the enemies, but we only work with which we have. In only modding just the visuals is going to be an easier thing, and we'll have easier time with that than actually going around and changing the intricate animations and stuff like that. So because the moblins is going to be something a bit tricky to deal with, what we're going to do is just introduce the moblin, and the moblin will be introduced wearing armor, and instead of holding a club, this time they will hold a sword. Oh, not a claymore, but just a sword for now. And they have armor lightly. So one hand will have an armor on that, like an iron type deal, or a metal, and not just the random scraps or leather. So as to serve as an introduction to the player, yeah, these variants do exist, and this kind of serve like a mini boss of some sort, like a check for the player that they know what they're doing with, what they're dealing with. The arena obviously will have some sort of things going on there, mainly with spikes. We need to add some spikes as just a part of the place, the set dressing, and not all of them will be on the edge. I'm just drawing them as in to signify that there is their presence in the arena. Obviously they can be near the center because they serve as an obstacle for the player and as a free hit on the moblin if they manage to fuck with their AI and try to make them follow them. If there is spikes over here and the thing is over there, you just do a loop, stand over here and wait for them to come, try to come at them and get damaged, or try to go around this, but they do a tight loop and they get damaged in the way, and you get free hits on them, especially if you have low health and you try to conserve as much as possible. Uh, so yeah, from here we can just keep scaling this up into non-existent. So let's move with something that is pretty interesting in terms of uh, adding variation to the environment. So before we set the environment of water, so I'm gonna add in one of water that I think this will be the last one because yeah, I don't want to make these a bit too long. I just want to make it just something that we can have a bit of fun with. So here we can have something that is pretty interesting. One that is like floating platforms, not like the other ones. So these are floating platforms. Let's make 4 of them for now. But the enemies right here are varied. They have like, for example, let's put like 3 bokoblins and 1 lizalfo. What this does is if you hit the wrong one, you're gonna create a problem for yourself because it will be hard for you to hit exactly this lizard because they move very fast when they are uh, underwater or on a water surface. And we're gonna start the player from an uneven ground, so it will be like something that is pretty broken right here, and we got like some floaties over here, platforms to this area right here. We got something that is floating out there and something that is floating out here connected vaguely to something that is floating out here. Right here is the uncharted territory with only like just a small land, so the player will stay concentrated in these islands like this archipelago right here or this one right here, where they can chase their enemies if they went into that ground right there. For example, if we want to make the lizard foes only aim from ground, so they maybe move away from the player and come right here, and thus make the player move to them. And if they do so, they're gonna be open for hits from lizard foes that are under the water, obviously. And for the placement of the enemies, we're gonna have archer enemies that are going to be on top right here. We're gonna have some, not all of these gonna be archers. We're gonna have the lizard one be an archer. We're gonna have the bokoblin one here be an archer. These ones are gonna have troubles. The ones right here next to the player will be a bokoblin that is armored and will cross to the player, signifying that these are safe for crossing and can be crossed, and that also enemies can cross to you. And at the same time, because this is narrow, so the possibility of them meeting right here in the middle is pretty high, which means that the player, when they hit the bokoblin, they're gonna knock them back and probably knock them back to the water, which is introducing to the player the fact that you can just drown them, not necessarily fight them all the way to the end. You're risking losing all of the loot from them because all of it will sink down, but you're gonna have an easier time and you're gonna conserve a lot of your energy to fighting the rest. So yeah, this island right here, we might put like a box for a breakable, like an item or something, because these we might give the player only like 3 arrows. So they might be incentivized to kill one of the archers, which one of them is a lizard, the one that is over here or the one that is over here is a lizard. So when you hit them, you might not know that lizards can swim faster or they can adapt into water in a way that you do not know how to in the beginning. Either you did not play the game that much, or you do not know of the mechanics that we introduce in the mod or the our own level and so on. So yeah, there is so much more that I want to talk about here and go into details of the systems and so on, of the systems of the game itself. Then the things that we're gonna build upon them, just modifying them just slightly, not changing them at all, because thus you will have changed the whole game, but just modifying them just a slight, tiny bit. So yeah, that's about it. Uh, Maybe in the future I will revisit this, and when I do, I will make sure to do so with the proper way of doing so. I think I will create some assets uh, before starting the recording to create like some sort of like a modular set or like a gym level uh, of everything, like how much the player can jump, how much can they climb, and so on, to create like all of these sorts of weird environments for them to traverse, and also creating variations of the mobs and so on. That will be fun, but it will require a lot of work beforehand, which I did not have, unfortunately. But the next one, I think it will be a bit more interesting than this one. So for now, thank you all for watching, for hanging around and all. And as always, make sure to have yourselves a damn good one.